What's up, guys? It's good to see you guys again. Back with another video. Here we're back to talk about the big one. I feel like people ask me all the time, and that is cameras. Cameras have been around for forever, but they haven't been on Twitch for too long. So let me go ahead and start to go over what kind of options you have as a camera to be able to stream with and try to up your quality a little bit to get something a little bit nicer. But let's get into it. When you're utilizing cameras, when I first started streaming, I started utilizing a camera called a C930E. This was my very first webcam I ever bought, and this is what I used back in the day when I first started streaming, and it worked. It was a great camera. It had a lot of capabilities, and a lot of people resort to the C920 and C930 as their first webcam of choice because it's so popular and they work so well and they're so versatile in terms of where you can place them, what you can do with them, and they even have speakers or microphones on here to be able to use them as a microphone source if you choose to. The next step above this, if you wanted to try to do something a little bit different with your webcams, just to have a little bit different of a look, is you can get yourself a nice little lens attachment and just stick it on the front of your camera. It's going to add a little bit of something different, and if I go ahead and try to compare these two for you guys, you can kind of see what we got going on here. So if I show you guys these two different cameras right here, you're going to see that one has a little wide angle lens and the other one doesn't, and you can see just kind of what effect that kind of gives you. This being the C930, you can see it's just very standard and nothing too fancy. And when I take the C920 over here with the lens attachment on there, you can see what it's doing. It's adding a little bit of that wide angle look to it, so when I get close my hand gets all big. You know, it has that much different of a look to it, and you can kind of see from the background here, if I pull this up, you look at the backward, these lines back here, you can kind of see that this one gets a little bowed outward, right? And so it's a type of look, and so if you guys wanted to, you guys could easily come in and just add a different lens, zoom in, or do something different to make your webcam stand out just that much more. What makes it really nice is I'm able to put this on my desk, let's say right here, and you're able to see a little bit more of me as well as my camera. And if I take this the other camera and I try to put it in that same spot, you're gonna see that you can't really get as much of everything in there as much as the other camera can. If I put this over here, you can kind of see how much more you're seeing with this. So it's kind of just like a little subtle difference. It's something that you can do if you don't want to have just a normal webcam. Try to spruce it up a little bit, add yourself a little secondary lens attachment to it, and get yourself something that looks a little bit different. I utilize this camera for a nice little over the room shot to be able to see more of my my office space when I'm getting my stream all started up and it's running through a little bit of music and a countdown timer, and I have that up in the corner. Another source you guys can use as a camera is your phone. There are ways of transmitting your phone signal over a USB or over an OTG cable or something like that. I forget what they're called, but you're able to transmit the signal from here over to your stream PC, and you might be able to Skype in or something like that, or actually find the proper app to send your video signal to your computer. That's a possibility, but then, you know, you're basically using your phone as a webcam and it's always on and it's just gonna get all hot. So another option that I typically use is a DSLR, and I'm gonna try to film this so you guys can kind of get an idea. So you guys are now gonna be able to see how this camera looks. This is a Sony A7S, and it's what I've been using as my primary camera for ever. I started using this camera back in 2015, 16, back when I was originally partnered. I think I was still utilizing this, and this camera has a 35 millimeter lens on it, and it opens up to a T1.5, and the lower that number is, the more shallower depth of field there is in terms of seeing this this very fine focus, where it's only on me, where I can back up and be out of focus and come back in and still be in focus. So this camera over here has literally been my workhorse for the entire stream, and it really adds this level of quality. And not only that, but I'm able to really pump this camera up in terms of exposure. So if I'm in a dark environment, the sensor on this camera really adds a mixture of it really adds a level of security with my own lighting that I can always up the camera ISO, or like the I don't know if you want to call it gain or video brightness or anything like that, but I can up the ISO speed to see more into the dark. I can literally bring this into a dark bathroom or something like that, and I can almost see perfectly. It's almost like night vision, I want to say. But yeah, so I've been utilizing this camera for a while. What's on the front of it is what's most important. People don't really understand that what's on top of, or what's in front of your camera is what's going to give it that look that you're trying so hard to achieve. I get lots of people that come into my stream and say, how do you get your camera to look like that? I don't understand. Is that a fake background? Is that something? Is that blah, 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 blah? And I have to tell them it is literally a lens. The lens on the front of this camera right now is what is giving me my shallow depth of field, as well as this overall softness, because I did some stuff to the lens to give a little bit of a filter, in a sense, to make it a little pleasing on the skin and a little bit more pleasing for lighting. You see how these lightings kind of bloom out a little bit. It's because I sprayed the front of my lens with this stuff, and it kind of like, it allows lights to bloom out in a sense that, like, if I turn on this flashlight right now, normally you wouldn't see this giant circle right here. It would be a smaller circle, but because I have a little bit of a spray on the lens itself, it's blooming out a little bit more. I like my lenses to look a little bit softer so that it's not so harsh on the eye, and it's not so crisp that it takes you out of my stream. I don't want it to feel so real that it doesn't look good to me. I've always liked filter as a stylistic choice. So yeah. There's multiple cameras and lens systems out there. A lot of people come to me asking, hey man, I'm thinking about going to DSLR. I'm thinking about going 4K. I'm thinking about going this and going that. And a lot of people come down to me and ask, I want your look. It looks so crispy. And crispy is not the right word to use. I think when people say crispy, they just mean it looks so high quality. But crispy, maybe that's the word people are using. I don't understand how people say that, but to each their own. I think the most people, when they come into this channel and they come into my stream, they notice the camera and they just notice the shallow depth of field. That is what is going to give it that look that usually people come in for. And if I come over here and I change the settings to make it a little bit different, you're gonna notice how much it changes the scene by me changing a couple settings. And now that I've changed a couple of settings, you can see that the blacks get a little bit brighter. It's not really what I want. I might have overexposed a little bit, but you can also see how much more stuff is in focus, and now I can kind of move around a little bit and not really get too much out of focus. This is what it comes down to. This is where people come and ask me, like, I want better quality, and the easiest way to do it is to change the lens on the front that is on the front of your camera. This camera can, that small number, that T1.5, allows me to open up that lens to absorb a lot of light in, and at the same time, it creates a very shallow depth of field. Without going too far into a description of how lenses work, the smaller the number, the shallower depth of field, but at the same time, I don't use an autofocus lens system, so if I back out of focus, and let me set it back. If I sit back out of focus, you can see just how fast I get out of focus, and no one's gonna want to watch your stream if you are constantly out of focus because the shallow depth of field is so shallow. So I rock a very fine line between what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. When my camera is moving around in my office, when it gets to the far sides of my rig, the focus starts to go out a little bit and I start to become a little bit softer and out of focus. And then my mic takes over and tries to steal the show. Yeah, when you're trying to find a lens that works for you, you have to determine whether or not you want a camera that will have that shallow depth of field, that will have autofocus, that will have an image stabilization built into the lens or the camera. And there's so many factors going in that you need to kind of like determine on your own what you want. Do you want to be able to swap the zoom size while you're streaming? Do you want to be able to change the focus yourself while you're streaming? Do you want the focus to always try to find you? You know, these are all questions you might have. And like, I have a secondary lens that I use for when I'm vlogging. It's this little 28 millimeter full frame lens here that I usually stick on the front of this guy. And this has autofocus built into it. And being a 28, I was like, I kind of want something even wider from when I'm vlogging. So my friend Manu bought me essentially another lens that attaches to this lens and creates for a wider image, it actually opens up, I think now to a 21mm lens instead of a 28mm lens, which is really, really handy in terms of getting a little bit of more coverage within my frame while I'm vlogging myself, or even if I have it on here. The problem and why I don't use this on my stream is because I don't get the same shallow depth of field. Again, this thing opens up to a T1.5. This one, I believe, goes to a 2 or a 2 something. I can't remember. And with this little attachment on here, I think it's actually worse. The number gets a little bit bigger, so it's a little bit even less shallow depth of field. I like the shallow depth of field look, and this lens won't give it to me. When I try to utilize this lens, if you go watch any of my vlogs, you can kind of get a sense of how that looks. And the only time you actually get a good shallow depth of field is if the camera's close enough, which is kind of the case when I'm actually vlogging because the camera's right here. Whereas this cam is a good 4 feet, 3 to 4 feet away. So yeah. Okay, so when it comes to selecting a camera, a video camera, a DSLR, or anything like that, there's a lot of factors coming in, and I'm gonna go over a couple of those right now because anytime someone comes into my stream or comes into me on Twitter asking about cameras, this is what I usually kind of go over with them. And one being, what kind of lens do you want? Right now, I use a prime lens. Some people prefer a zoom lens. Some people prefer a tight lens. Some people prefer a wide lens. There's a lot of different types of lenses out there, and you got to find a look that is for you. When I'm talking about this camera with a little attachment on it, it widens everything out to kind of have a little bit of a fisheye look, but maybe you don't want that fisheye look, but you still want it to be wide, so you got to put that camera further away to be able to have the same frame, but less bug eye, fisheye kind of a situation. 2, you're gonna want to make sure your camera can output whatever FPS that you want. So like I like to shoot at 60 frames per second, so my camera can get up to 60 frames per second. Set up improperly, it might look very choppy, and the motion blur might not look natural and might look kind of weird. Another thing is to make sure that you can output that signal out of your camera into a capture card. And the best way to test that is to take a small TV, any TV, doesn't matter, that has an HDMI input, stick your camera into the TV and see what your camera is going to see. And that's what your capture card is going to see. If you have a bunch of things on screen, you're gonna want to try to turn some of that stuff off. I've seen people have their cameras like from Canon or something like that have like a little white box. That's usually where you punch in to check focus. And sometimes you can't turn that thing off. And that could be a problem with those little on-screen elements. So make sure you can turn off those items. Another thing I want to talk to you guys about is the ability to be able to turn off your auto off on the camera. Like a lot of cameras have a built-in auto off feature, and if you can't turn that off, you're not gonna be able to stream with this camera because it's gonna shut itself off. You're gonna have to reboot it every couple minutes or touch it every couple minutes just to keep it active, and nobody wants to do that. So make sure there is a way to turn off the auto off feature of a camera that you are potentially looking at getting. Some concerns I actually get when people talk to me about cameras is like, hey, Acti, won't my camera burn in? Won't it like explode or something like that if you leave it on too long? I'm worried. The answer is no. It's not going to. It's not going to burn up. Cameras are designed to shut themselves off if they get too hot. Your camera will automatically turn itself off. And if it is doing that, you don't want to force it back on because then you're pushing the boundaries of your camera where it's saying, hey, I'm too hot. I need to cool down. Please let me cool down. And you don't want to keep your camera on that whole time and burn it up. You know what I mean? That's when a situation that comes up that happens. But for the most part, if you were just viewing your camera through an HDMI source and you're not recording on your camera's not really generating any heat. My camera is left on, I want to say 24 hours a day, 30 days a month. You know what I mean? I leave this camera on a lot and a long time. It hardly ever turns off, and I've never had an issue with burnt-in pixels, the camera frying itself, or anything like that. My only concern about burning something is potentially burning in your LCD screen from being on all the time. And I know that there are some settings inside of cameras that allow you to turn off those settings or the screen so that you can just have it not burn anything into the screen. I've had my LCD screen on forever and it hasn't burnt in. Sony, props to you guys. This camera's been on the whole time and it hasn't burned into the little LCD on the back end side of my camera. If your camera is shutting off on its own, do not try to keep it on. If you can turn off the auto off feature and your camera is allowed to stay on for hours at a time and it doesn't get, hot to the point where it shuts itself off, you're good to go. There's no problems. One other thing is you want to make sure that your camera has a way to stay on all the time, regardless of anything else. Batteries aren't going to cut it. You're going to be swapping those batteries a lot unless you have short streams. You're going to need yourself a little AC power supply to be able to keep that camera on. So make sure you research ahead of time if there's a way to keep it on. I know some people try to go the USB route and try to keep the camera on that way. I haven't tested that, and I don't know that that is the best way to keep a camera powered on. I've seen cameras plugged into computers via USB, and people try to send signals through that, and their frame rate gets cut down to like 15 FPS. You don't want that. So try to get yourself an AC power supply. They're usually like a dummy battery that has a little cable that comes out of it and plugs into the wall, and you stick that up into your camera, and you are good to go as long as you don't trip on the cable or anything like that. Now, what if you don't have the means of purchasing one of these higher end cameras? These cameras can go up between anywhere from $500 to $3,000 or more, depending on what you want to do, but you still want to have that like augmented look. And here is an idea that I have for you guys, and I haven't put it to the test, and I'm going to test it right now just to see if you guys find it maybe at all interesting. And that would be to take a screen grab of what your camera's seeing. You would take a screen grab of this, right? Get yourself out of the frame, take your chair away, move your mic out of the way, and just get a clean image of your background. And we're actually going to try this right now with a little webcam right here. So if you guys want to, I'll walk you through a little tutorial, and we'll see if this thing can actually work. This will require a green screen. And yeah, so if you don't have a green screen, maybe this isn't going to work for you. But at the same time, maybe this is something that is going to be cool and will give you that little bit of edge of crispiness that everyone is desiring and that wants. So we're gonna go over here and we're gonna add our camera in. I'm gonna go ahead and screen grab this camera. So I'm gonna hit print screen. We're gonna open up, let's say Photoshop. Let me just open up Photoshop really quickly. And with Photoshop open, we're gonna create a new. We're gonna go to custom 1920 by 1080, hit apply. And we're gonna open up an image that we just took a screenshot of. So here in Photoshop, we have that image that we just got ourselves. So what I want to do, and this might be kind of weird, is I want to just add a way to blur the entire image. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over and we're going to add a filter, and we're going to add a blur, and we're going to blur this to the extreme. Not crazy, but like just enough to where it looks unique. So we're going to add a little bit of a blur there, and we're going to save this image. So after adding that blur, save. So back into OBS, we're going to come in here and we're going to add a image, and we're going to select that source that we just created moments ago. We're going to open up this image right here, and now this is our primary scene on in OBS. So now we're going to re-add our camera back into the source. So now we have our camera here, and we're going to go ahead and again go full screen with this guy, however we see fit. And here's the next part, and that's called a green screen. So I was given this green screen a long time ago, and within my channel, I've never really wanted to utilize a green screen, but this might be a good option for you guys to be able to do this this situation. We're gonna put that right behind me, okay? So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back over to my main scene here. So over in this little area, we're gonna go ahead and start to mess with our settings. So over here, I'm gonna go to my configure video, and it looks like my video just kind of tweaked itself out right there. And we're gonna go ahead and change the white balance to something that looks a little bit natural there, and we're gonna change our brightness controls and something to make that green just kind of stand out and be uniformly lit. And maybe this works right here. So you can see that this is a little bit brighter on this side, and over here, I'm gonna show. Oh, you can see how much this side of the green is a little bit darker, and that's not really good for green screen work. But for this case, it shouldn't matter too much. But the plan is here is we're gonna come over to our camera and add a filter, and we're gonna go ahead and add our a little chroma key filter. So if we have the chroma key filter, hit apply, and we're gonna start to see it's gonna take out that background behind me. So if I go ahead and tweak this a little bit here, I'm gonna try to get this to a very simplified version of a green screen. We're gonna grab our image, we're gonna grab myself here, and we're gonna go ahead and hold Alt, and we're gonna drag this over and just get our head space in here so it's very tight, and maybe that's my frame, right? And let's go ahead and hide the display capture. You can kind of get an idea with, with minimal work here. you can see that if I were to properly light that green screen, that this could potentially be a very cool look. This could be like I'm augmenting this camera here that is now blown out, but it does kind of have that little bit of background blur to it, and it's just a way to get yourself a better looking image, and that can literally be anything you want. Now you can kind of see where this might be beneficial in creating like an augmented higher end camera. I'm kind of faking it right now, and with more time I could try to make this look really, really good. I could fine tune it, get rid of some of that this green spill right here, and just try to make this look a little bit better to get that better looking image. And all it is a picture. With that green screen in mind, that is a particular situation in which you could have a better looking stream utilizing a green screen and just your everyday webcam to try to augment the look of a professional DSLR camera. And maybe this will kind of help someone out there. Maybe. I hope that this has kind of helped in some sort of way to get you guys familiar with cameras and what you can do to step up your own camera game. Cameras are my world, so I understand cameras. And if you guys have questions or concerns about your cameras, feel free to leave it in the comments below and I'll get to everything I can. But yeah, if you guys want to learn more information, you guys want to send me a message on Twitter, feel free. Twitter is @TwitchActivator, and you can follow me there. You can also sub to me here on YouTube, like this video if it helps you out at all. I'm live over on twitch.tv/activator with an E. So follow me on Twitch. I'm live Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. I live in Brooklyn, New York, so that's why we're saying Eastern. But yeah, so come check me out Monday through Friday. I don't stream on Saturday and Sunday anymore. But if you guys have questions, drop on in, ask me anything you want, dude. I love talking about this stuff, and I can talk about cameras and gear all day. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me, and post comments down below, message me on Twitter, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much for being here, and that's it. Bye.